The war in Iran is deepening the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. In violation of the ceasefire, Israel has severely restricted aid and maintained its airstrikes. The US brokered deal is meant to be in phase 2, but appears to be in limbo. So, who could step in to help Palestinians? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. It's called the Forgotten Crisis. Humanitarian conditions in Gaza remain dire, despite a US-brokered ceasefire that came into effect in October. For months, the Israeli military violated the agreement, carrying out airstrikes, limiting the entry of aid and building materials. But it got worse when Israel and the US launched their joint offensive on Iran at the end of February. The Rafah border crossing, a lifeline in southern Gaza, was closed again, and Israel further restricted deliveries of food, fuel, and humanitarian aid. With the war in Iran disrupting global supply chains and the UN warning of threats to food security, what are the implications for Palestinians in Gaza? We'll discuss that with our guests in just a moment. But first, this report from Michael Apple.
An Israeli airstrike targets a vehicle, killing everyone inside. There's a war going on, but this isn't Iran. It's what a ceasefire looks like to Palestinians in Gaza.
We feel that we are in a state of war and that the war is still raging in the region. We witness bombardments and assassinations all the time. Even though we are in a ceasefire, we do not feel it.
Isra is among the estimated 1.7 million people forced from their homes in the Strip. With some plastic and a lot of prayer, she tries to keep the rain at bay. Her hopes that there's an end in sight to the misery is fraying, much like her tent. The UN says some Palestinians are only getting half of the calories needed to sustain life. Israel maintains a stranglehold on the border crossings. Many here say they feel forgotten by the world.
Before the Iran war, the same people who forgot about us then just keep on forgetting about us now. Food supplies have decreased and prices have gone up.
The landscape is apocalyptic. It bears the scars of war, but the human cost cannot be ignored. Israeli attacks have killed nearly 73,000 Palestinians since October the 7th, 2023, the vast majority of them women and children. More than 172,000 people have been wounded, many of them sustaining life-changing injuries. Another 10,000 Palestinians are unaccounted for, believed to be buried underneath the mountains of rubble. Israel still controls nearly 60% of Gaza. A so-called yellow line marking where its troops are meant to operate came into effect with the ceasefire, but it's regularly violated. The killing hasn't stopped either. More than 700 Palestinians have been killed during the nearly 6 months of the ceasefire. The UN estimates the Israeli military has dropped around 200,000 tons of munitions on Gaza, and up to 12% of those bombs haven't detonated. Specialized teams find them and mark them UXO, unexploded ordnance, a danger that will take decades to clear. Palestinians are trapped in limbo, enduring a fragile ceasefire while the humanitarian crisis deepens, and much of the world's attention is focused elsewhere. Michael Apple, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Now, before we talk to our guest, let's talk to our correspondent in Gaza City, Hind Khudri. Hind, you've been a correspondent for us now since almost the beginning of the war and throughout the ceasefire, but I don't want to speak to you as a correspondent today. I want to talk about your family, your friends. I want to talk about Palestinians and how they're still suffering despite this ceasefire. Life's just not got any easier for you, right?
Well, Imran, I remember talking to you the last time 6 months ago, and we were very hopeful at that time. For example, I was looking forward to see my family as we have been separated since October 2023, but still 6 months into the ceasefire, and I still didn't see my mom or meet my brothers. And I'm not the only case. There are thousands of Palestinians that are still waiting for freedom of movement. It's not only that, it's the continuous humanitarian situation which is deteriorating every single day. I mean, I have been sick for the past week and I haven't been finding any medicine. I have been going through pharmacies, going through hospitals, and the Israeli authorities are not letting in any medical supplies into the Gaza Strip. And I'm talking about a normal flu and infection in the lungs. There's no antibiotics, there's no Ventolin inhalers, and this is the case and has been the case for the past 6 months. There has been a lot of promises. Most of Gaza's population is literally still living on the streets in very fragile, torn out tents where shelter items are not entering. And with the Iran war now, Palestinians feel more forgotten because there has been no progress in the ceasefire deal, in the technocrat teams that were supposed to be coming into Gaza Strip. More restrictions have been imposed on the Gaza Strip. And let me tell you very basic stuff where eggs, for example, are still a struggle for a lot of Palestinians. Anything nutritious has been banned into the Gaza Strip. And we all carry this amount of loss, amount of homelessness, the loneliness we're still feeling, that yes, there is ceasefire, but we're still being killed every couple of days, where in the last couple of days there has been a vehicle that has been targeted where 3 people were killed. Police officers have also been a target by the Israeli authorities, and also the fact that there are thousands of Palestinians still trapped under the rubble, where families weren't even able to bury whatever is remained of their families.
Hind, that's the story during the day, but when the night falls and it gets colder and people are living in tents, it just must be even worse. I mean, just what's it like being a child there?
Children, Imran, are still queuing up on food kitchens, on water trucks, because none of these struggles have been solved. Also, the fact that your mother is cuddling you because it's the only source of warmth, the fact that rain is another nightmare other than airstrikes. And Imran, believe me, we are still literally sleeping every single day on very loud drone sounds, as drones did not leave the sky of Gaza, neither night or day. And it is the ongoing trauma of this sound, where we used to hear it and we expected an airstrike over and over again. Most of Gaza's children are still deprived from medicine, they're still deprived from education. And also, let me tell you that there are thousands of children that were the only survivors, and they're living without parents, without family members. And children, every child in Gaza carries a different story of struggle, and all of these stories are heartbreaking.
I mean, Hun, I really hope you get some medicine soon, because I can hear it in your voice. Thank you for bringing us up to date for what it's like for people just living in Gaza. Let's now bring in our guest from southern Lebanon. We're joined by Dr. Mohammed Tahir, a war surgeon who has worked extensively in Gaza. He's also the CEO of Al Risala Foundation. Alex DeWall is in Boston, Massachusetts. He's the executive director of the World Peace Foundation and specializes in famine. And in Ramallah, Xavier Abu Eid, he's a political analyst and former communications director for the Palestine Liberation Organization. A warm welcome to you all. I want to start with Dr. Mohammed in southern Lebanon. You just heard our correspondent there, Hind Khudri, talking about the fact that you can't even get cold and flu tablets, over-the-counter medications in Gaza. If you can't get that, and there's been a war on the medical sector, there's just no medicines in Gaza now. How does that make you feel, given that you worked in that sector?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for having me. Look, what we know about the Israeli regime is that The killing never stops and the suffering never stops. It just transitions from phase to phase. Sometimes the killing is accelerated, the suffering is ever more. And then when they turn direction to another part of the world and they bring about suffering there, they slow the suffering elsewhere. And that's simply because they don't have the bandwidth to bring about so much suffering across the world in the same intensity. Now, Gaza, of course, when I was there, it was a killing field. It was an abattoir. And actually, now that I'm based in Lebanon, I can tell you that I'm in a war here today in Lebanon. But Gaza was something completely different. That was an outright genocide. And the suffering is unimaginable. I oftentimes think back to what we saw, and it's unthinkable that this was ever allowed to happen. Today in Gaza, I was talking to my colleagues, in fact, yesterday. They have no building material to reestablish hospitals. They have no access to materials to do interventional procedures. They're lacking in oncologists. They're lacking in pulmonologists. They're lacking in endoscopists. They're lacking in plastic surgeons. And of course, you heard simple medicines not being available, bringing about the suffering for the average person on day to day. But the most vulnerable are also at most risk. And you see every day people dying in front of our screens and pleads going out to the world for evacuation. Evacuations come to a halt as well. So the suffering is really something that cannot be imagined.
Javier, I'm going to bring you in just a second because I want to talk to you about all the politics of this. But on the humanitarian front, I want to start with Alex de Waal. Alex, this is a famine that's unfolding in front of our eyes, on our cameras, but is not getting any attention.
Regrettably, tragically, appallingly so. So exactly a year ago, a year before the operation that President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu unleashed on Iran, there was the complete siege on Gaza. And that siege was tighter than the siege today. But the condition of the people entering into those siege conditions today is as we've just been hearing, utterly deplorable. These are people already at the brink. So deprived of so many of the essentials needed to sustain life, living in the most miserable conditions, really ground down by 2.5 years. And so what I fear we will be seeing is a descent into famine conditions, comparable to what we saw at the same time last year, with the difference that last year there was international attention and outcry, which mounted over the months, and eventually by September, October, pushed the United States to recognize what was happening and pushed Israel towards opening the border crossings and so on. And I don't see any of that pressure now, as we've been hearing. This is a crisis forgotten, ignored by the world.
Well, let's talk about that pressure. Javier, I don't need to ask you about the suffering of the Palestinians. You live it every single day. But there is a board of peace. There is, a ceasefire. There's supposed to be a negotiation going on. This is not supposed to be happening. Phase 2 is supposed to be happening. That all seems to have disappeared. Am I right in thinking that?
Certainly, Imran. Thanks for having me here. First of all, the Board of Peace, it's unleashing its kind of attempt to set an alternative to the UN by President Donald Trump and his administration. The person they have in charge of the Gaza reconstruction, Mr. Mladenov, who is a former UN envoy here, he doesn't have words when Palestinians are killed on a daily basis in Gaza, nor when there is very limited access to water, cooking gas, and other important elements. So clearly what we are facing, Imran, not only in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank, is how the Israeli plans that talk about openly now about ethnic cleansing about annexation are coming out without any sort of significant international response. And let's be very clear, this is not only about the Trump administration. We are facing terror attacks by Israeli settlers on a daily basis here in the occupied West Bank. The European Union response seems to be something like calling for more reforms within the Palestinian Authority and supporting this as a way of getting closer to a state that is appearing on the ground because of the culture of impunity that Israel continues to enjoy. So it's a situation of overall crisis, I would define.
I mean, Javier, I just want to follow up on that because 1,500 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October the 7th, 2023. That's more than that were killed on October the 7th, 2023, right? That day that actually unleashed hell on Gaza. If Gaza was the war that everybody concentrated on, it's a forgotten war in the occupied West Bank. Raids are going on every single day. I've been there. I've seen them. I've been at the end of them. So, why do you think the occupied West Bank is the forgotten part of this war, do you think?
It may be, Imran, perhaps because here there is no armed resistance against Israeli occupation. And it seems that the international community, and particularly Western powers, only tend to care about what's happening in Palestine when there are Israelis that are being affected by Palestinian resistance. And that's extremely unfortunate because it sends a very wrong message. Just over the month of March, we had over 200 Israeli settler terror attacks against Palestinians, not counting the actions of the Israeli occupation forces. Not a single Israeli settler has been arrested or prosecuted for those attacks. But in return, we had 6 Palestinians killed by those Israeli settlers. We have dozens, if not hundreds, of settler militias armed by the Israeli government and Israel in general. They are not really facing consequences or meaningful consequences for their actions. So clearly what we are facing here in the occupied West Bank is extremely dramatic. Why? Because here also it's a priority of Israel. Here is where they have over 200 settlements, 700,000 settlers, and the campaign to annex more and more Palestinian land.
Alex, I'm going to come to you now. The Board of Peace was set up to get to a place where they could get food, aid, everything into the Gaza Strip and look for a long-term solution. But there was an organisation in place that could do that had all of the knowledge and the infrastructure, and that was the United Nations. It was the United Nations Relief Works Agency, the refugee agency for the Palestinians. Israel completely sidelined it. So the Gaza Board of Peace is a failure, do you think?
I think you've really answered your question in the way that you've framed it, and I think that's absolutely correct. There was a workable infrastructure that could deliver the essentials with the professional proficiency, the reach, the partnership, the experience, and above all, the humanity, the fact that UNRWA and other international organizations present on the ground in Gaza, also in the West Bank, have those roots, those contacts with the community, means that they can respond with the sense of compassion, with the sense of humanity to the people and their real needs, albeit with very limited resources under extreme duress. And what we have with the Board of Peace is essentially a vacuum. We have plans for more militarized forms of ration provision. We have plans for building a sort of Riviera. This is a performance populist peace combined with a kleptocratic peace for profit formula. It is throwing away everything that we know has worked and everything that is founded on the basic principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law.
Mohammed, doctors like you have been barred from going back into Gaza. You yourself, as I understand it, are not allowed to go back in to Gaza. Israel is restricting even volunteers getting in. The Board of Peace is clearly, as we've heard, isn't really doing the things it's supposed to be doing. You were nodding your head in agreement there when they were talking about the fact that there was a mechanism that allowed people like you in, and that's been destroyed. Just talk to us about the effect on the medical professionals like you when you can't get in to help.
You're absolutely right. Look, my colleagues in Gaza are phenomenal doctors, physicians, nurses, and so on. They've just been constrained by the environment imposed upon them by the Israeli regime, in that they're not allowed, for example, to go outside for fellowship training, pick up skills that otherwise other surgeons would have access to. And in addition to that, of course, they have a limitation on technology and healthcare and so on. And so, although they're talented surgeons, there are certain areas or certain areas of expertise that are missing there. And they are reliant upon colleagues from the outside coming in and not only performing surgeries there, but also trying to fill the gap in the training that they've been denied. And as a result, lots of people simply don't have access to the usual sort of healthcare people would around the world. In addition to that, you have to remember you're dealing with the most complex and severe injuries on the face of this earth. And I'm telling you this firsthand because I was involved in a medical evacuation program where we took out the most complex cases to neighboring countries, and we were treating them there, and that involved a multidisciplinary team from the globe to arrive at at decisions in the patient's best interest. And so when they deny us, they're basically not only cutting off a lifeline to the doctors there in terms of training, they're denying patients, their right, innocent people, their right to healthcare. And this is, of course, all orchestrated. It's a strangulation process. They don't want the people of Gaza to be there anymore. This is we are on a phase of genocide. And of course, they're not going to allow people like me. Me coming on the show, for example, means that I don't have access to Gaza anymore. Anyone who's outspoken, anyone who describes the suffering, they ban you.
Alex, how much of what you've just heard Dr. Mohammed talk about constitutes a war crime?
It's worse than a war crime. I mean, this is the crime that it's a crime of extermination, it's a crime of genocide, but it's something more. It's a crime against humanity in the most profound sense, that it is trying to kill the humanity of a people, and the sense of trauma that these people who have survived this will have for the rest of their lives, the extent to which the basic social fabric that makes us more than simple animals has been destroyed is deeply profound. And let me just add one sort of detail to this, which is that when we think of the number of people who are suffering from physical and mental disabilities as a result of this, just the number of child amputees is a very, very straightforward, visible, tangible example. How are these young children going to be able to become food secure themselves? How are they going to have livelihoods? How are they going to earn money? How are they going to be able to provide for families in future? The level of vulnerability to destitution, to food insecurity, to hunger is so much higher as a result of this onslaught.
Javier, one of the words that's always used for the Palestinians, whether it's in the occupied West Bank, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's abroad, is resilience. The Palestinians, we are used to this. We will, resist in our own little ways. And there is a certain amount of that is true. But I'm speaking to people now, and everybody is getting much more and more frustrated at this idea that the world's ignoring us because we've been through it since 1948. So everybody's just used to it. How would you kind of combat that if you were speaking to somebody from, say, the UN who was like, maybe we should give them some money, but maybe not. They've been going through this for far too long.
Imran, I think we should not romanticize resilience. We should be very proud of Palestinian resilience since 1948. However, this is not how a people should be living. We are in a constant state of struggling. I mean, today, people are celebrating Easter, to give an example. And even in order to get to a church, people have to actually fight for their right. Even praying has become an act of resistance under Israeli occupation, not to talk, of course, about Al-Aqsa Mosque being closed during most of the holy month of Ramadan. So, in other words, when we talk about Palestinian resilience, I think it involves all aspects of Palestinian life, but people should not get used to it. People should get to act in order for Palestinians to be able to enjoy their rights. And here, I think, Imran, what's extremely important is, as we've been talking in this program, is to make clear that what's happening with Palestinians, it's not just a situation between Israel and Palestine, but it has an international responsibility element that's not being met as we speak.
Alex, one of the things about attention, global attention, when it comes to a particular genocide like Gaza is that you get money. Donor step forward. It's a thing that it pushes, that publicity almost pushes somebody to do something. But when the spotlight disappears, that money also disappears, right?
That's correct. And we have the 1-2 terrible punch. Not only is the publicity vanishing and therefore the public funding, but also aid budgets are being cut, and not just in the United States. I mean, the United Kingdom is now giving a lower proportion of its GDP per capita as international aid than at any time in the last 60 years. And that is absolutely shocking. The funds for this are drying up. And people are being left on their own. And however resilient, however steadfast they are, there comes a point at which human life simply cannot be sustained under this pressure.
I want to thank our guests, Alex de Waal, Xavier Abu Eid and Dr. Mohammed Tahir. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. That's it from me, Imran Khan, and the team here in Doha. Stay with us for more coverage of the war between the US, Israel and Iran, coming up in just a moment.